this is Rumor. I recently gave a tour of my tarot table and showed briefly how I've got a couple boxes down here of decks. But the box that I'm going to focus on today is this top box of tarot. All right then. So my previous videos for what's in the box or what's in the bag have focused on very specific themes. I've had animal decks, oceanic decks, forest and fae, gothic decks, holiday decks, so on and so forth. And so these decks here don't follow a specific theme, really. This is just a box that, as I showed you, sits right beside my tarot table, and I originally set this up and selected these decks just with the idea of having some good all-rounders readily at hand to use. These are basically decks, and it's not limited to these decks, certainly. I've got others that would apply. But just in general, and basically also because I had overflow for like the bigger box that I have of some of my more general decks. So I also just needed to make some space. But anyways, I decided to just like isolate a few that I thought like could pretty much be used for any reading. Nothing too heavy necessarily, but also like could deal with a serious question too, if need be. There's nothing in here that's like hardcore shadow work or spiritual. I guess I also considered these decks that I would use if someone else had a question for me. I'm not a professional, so I just mean like a friend or a family member. And I thought that like I could see choosing from these if I just wanted to do like a quick general reading for someone. It seemed like ones that most people would probably be receptive to, and especially if they're not familiar with the tarot. There's nothing like super intimidating about any of these, but I don't know. That's the best I can do by way of rationalization. This does tend to evolve, and it's not an end-all be-all selection here. It really is just like managing some overflow, but I also feel like, again, these are decks that are just kind of like good go-tos if I'm not like in a specific mood necessarily or aiming for a specific type of reading. Hopefully you know what I mean. So why don't I just get started with it? So here, I have featured this before as my Levi's 501s of decks. This is my Spacious Tarot, which I've edged in a faded denim distress ink. And this deck, I just feel like, is very versatile. I think that was why I had featured it before in a VR to Marlena Teresa for Tarot Extremes. And oh my God, I'm forgetting on what exactly the category was called for this, but I just felt like I could do any kind of reading with this deck. And this is the deck when I just want to feel like I'm breathing in a deep gulp of fresh air. There really is a space allowed in this, as it puts you in the POV of these scenes. Some of the cards are kind of hippish, but generally, I just feel like immersed, but it's not diving into a world that's miring me down. It's very open and fresh. And yes, so again, it's a deck I just feel like I could pretty much grab it for anything and anyone. So it lives in its cozy jeans here. So then behind that, this one's probably gonna make everyone laugh and roll eyes, because I'm sure everyone's so over it, but I'm sorry, I still like the light seers. I find I'm not using it as much as I used to, but I still like it. I still think it's beautiful. I always felt a little old maybe for it. When I see these like young free spirits, very boho, and there are some older ages depicted in here too, but regardless, this is one I've definitely used if any friends or family have asked me for a reading, because I just feel like it is palatable, works for a lot of questions. It's such eye candy. I love the vibrancy of the colors. I love the detail. And it really just does bring in the light. So I feel like this is one that will be dated someday. I feel like everything is very boho and new agey at the moment. And if we kind of move past that, at least as far as like larger mainstream trends, it'll start to show its era, but whatever. I still like it. I get such clear readings from it. As you might have seen, used it last year for my Wheel of the Year, and I decided to use it again for this year because it's just a clear reader. It's very easy for me. So again, just a nice one to have on hand if I'm just looking for that kind of straightforward and yet still deep enough reading. So this one, okay, this used to home my Sassaribito Tarot. I shared in a recent Purgatory video, Deck Declutter, that is one that I am moving along, at least the version that I have of it. I may still acquire the Tiny Traveler, which is a smaller size in a linen. But for right now, the new occupant is the Housewives Tarot. And I mean, I don't know how like general of an all-arounder this deck is really. I mean, it does seem like I need to be in a particular mood for it, but I think it's nice to still just have something that's very cheeky right on hand. And it does seem like it'd be good for general readings, daily readings, just a nice, casual, light, quirky voice. I have not worked with this deck a lot, so that's also part of the reason for keeping it nearby so that I will think of it and remember to bring it out. And again, I can see it being great for just like a daily draw, something to keep the mood uplifted. Okay, so then moving to the center row, I've got... I love this bag for it because, well, you see the stars, but all these different creatures, like there's werewolves, dragons. I forget, what would the word be for this? I mean, it's like a horsey mermaid. I'm sure there's a name for it I'm not thinking of. But speaking of, there are also mermaids in here too. So with these like fantastical creatures, they can pretty much all be found in this deck, which is the Inkwitch Tarot. We see some, well, a variety of things. I mean, you get some King Arthur legend in here. There are mermaids. There is at least one dragon. I think there's maybe a couple of dragons. But also some modern depictions. Definitely brings it more into a more current time than the days of yore when there were knights. But sparklers, but then you get some mythology. So yeah, this is an interesting deck, and this is actually the reason why I originally didn't want to get it, because I was like, wow, this is really across the board. I didn't really know like what the common denominator was across all of these different references. But then it's like, I just really love the aesthetic of it. I love the color palette of it. It's great. So I mean, I think because it is just kind of like all across the board, I think it is another deck that I feel like I could pretty much use for any kind of reading, really. Haven't worked with it as much as I want to. Probably with all of these decks, it's probably a big reason why I keep it right there, so that I can just like remember them and think to grab them. Moving on then to Smith-Waite Tarot. This is my cropped version. RWS based deck, but also can put its own spin on things too. But overall fairly traditional, and just lends itself well yet again to just a general reading. And I feel like I could pretty much pull this out for anyone, and it's a nice clear reader, and I feel like it's relatively neutral in tone. So yeah, just another great all around deck. How many times am I going to use the same words to describe? Sorry, but that really is like encapsulating why any of these decks are in this box. So I really do apologize that I'm getting so repetitive. I forgot that this was in here. Hang on. Pardon me. As I open this little burlap bag, is this what I think it is? Gosh, that's pretty pathetic that that's how long it's been since I've used it. Oh, it is what I thought it was. The Roots and Wings. I completely forgot that I threw that in here. But this was a mini version of the Roots and Wings Oracle. And I believe, yeah, that's the only Oracle deck that I keep in here. Really pretty with Spacious Tarot, really pretty with a lot of decks. And if you just go by the keywords alone, it's such a well-rounded deck. It's really probably one of the most tarot-like Oracle decks that I own, because I feel like it captures, all of the energies running the gamut of the tarot in one way or another. So ergo, a good one to have on hand at the table. I think when I got all this set up too, I fancied that I would be doing more readings for other people, which I really don't. But I mean, I don't really put myself out there for it. And again, it's not something I do professionally or that I'm seeking to do professionally. I just mean for kith and kin, you know? But then here is my Amanda, a Venus in Virtue crocheted wrap, which I love so much. And she had featured it at her Etsy shop with the Tarot de Carlotydes, and that's exactly what I wanted it for. So I've also shown this deck recently. Sweet, sweet little size, sweet, sweet little deck. I just think that this artwork is so charming, really darling. Again, it's just something I will pull out for general readings. Anything, really. Or if I think it's aesthetic, suits another deck really well. Oh my gosh, everything's out of control. It's making a break for it. Yikes. You calm down, you. So like I was saying with the Ink Witch, this is another deck where the images or kind of across the board as far as what exactly they're depicting across time and culture. There's something kind of folktale and fairy tale about it. It's just pretty. And it's yet another one that I pretty much could be in the mood for all the time. Again, how I feel about all of these decks. And oop, this is a little Mangano calcite that I keep with that because it's pink and pretty. But I was just saying, you know, again, with all of these decks, I feel like they are ones where I can pretty much be in any mood and okay to like pick them up, you know, where I've got other decks which just have a really distinct tone that I just might not be feeling, or it's just something way too abstract than what I'm looking for. I just want to sit, again, do something daily, do something general, just want a clear reader, don't want to go too dark, maybe still want to go deep, but just not something really lofty and incredibly big picture. Like, I just get more of an everyday sense from some of these. That being said, though, this deck, I do feel like I pull out when I'm in a certain mood, but I don't think, oh, I got a knot. I don't think that it's limited to that, though, and I don't limit it to that. But I guess among all of these, and here's a black tourmalinated quartz that I keep with it. One of my favorite crystals. Tarot of the Abyss. So I guess if among all these sort of like general and kind of generally lighter hearted, not necessarily though, they aren't all, but I mean, I hope you've been able to see though for yourself that there's nothing too like heavy in here. And this deck is not heavy, but I do feel like even on an everyday casual kind of basis, if I am sort of looking for something to maybe get a bit more into exploring my emotional terrain, I feel like that's because it's something I found myself grabbing it for really early on when I first got it. It was like new and setting out, and I kind of found myself in a bad mood. I've been kind of cranky with my husband and everything, and sometimes when I'm just like sitting and stewing with that, I'll pull the cards out just to do like a quick 3-card reading of like, how am I justified? Like in anything that I'm feeling, maybe anything that I've said with my sharp forked tongue, like how am I valid in like feeling and expressing myself this way? But then also, how am I not? Like, where have I maybe overstepped? Am I bringing too much emotion into it? Could I have handled it better, more constructively? And then a 3rd card for like, well, how to resolve that. So basically this is like my arguments with my husband deck. It kind of became early on. And you know, that's not happening all the time, so I'm not pulling it out for that all the time. I also used this deck a lot last year. It was a time of like really wanting to be there for others and really needing to show up for them. But at the same time, a situation that was making me feel very vulnerable. And so I was trying to like balance showing up for others with my own self-care. And so this was just really lovely to work with for that too. There's just something about the simplicity of the color palette. You know, just this black on sort of a cream background. I think it helps me to just see things a bit more black and white. And I already hate that I said that because I don't care for binary thinking. I don't think it's great to be in a mindset of, you know, either or, good or bad. I think it's important to explore that gray area in between. But sometimes if I'm just very like muddled in my thoughts and my emotions, there's just like more of a clarity that comes through by kind of paring this down and just keeping it more monochromatic. I always describe this deck as wispy, but there's something about that too. And like just the movement and airiness of these lines that kind of helps it in a different way from the Spacious Tarot. I feel like it just sort of blows this like gentle breeze through my head and helps me clear it a bit. And I feel like there's a more of like a light darkness balance in here too. I mean, there are no cards in here that I consider particularly dark and shadowy. There's a lot of feeling and depth in here though. And I mean, you know, so it's like, I feel like this deck can see me a lot where I'm at. Oh, this is the Drusilla card. Buffy fans, I'm telling you, it's Juliet Landau. I'm kind of all over the place in how I'm describing this deck, but I do feel like that's how cool is the Hanged Man? I mean, it's actually giving you the upside down perspective as if you're hanging. But yeah, I think it's just how it makes me feel. There's something a little bit more visceral about it, something that really like taps into thought and emotion for me. And so, okay, then maybe I do find myself grabbing it at certain times rather than others, but it's still something I feel like it's accessible enough that I still consider it a go-to, and like I could do any kind of reading for this. And even if it was just something really general, like I don't think that I need to be in a particularly dark and broody place for it or something super expansive and spiritual. I think it has helped me with just day to day. Well, like I said, even if I'm using it to sort of referee a little spat I might have had domestically, you know, that's an everyday thing. Like it is just sort of like, you know, those moments where maybe my temperament gets the best of me and it's just like a stupid, simple, mundane situation that might have gotten blown out of proportion, and I'm trying to gauge if I'm the one that blew it out of proportion. So it very much is still a part of like my everyday life. And I think it is good to have, you know, as opposed to something that's so like light and fun and cheeky like the Housewives, it is good to balance that out with something that can get a little bit more serious. And I feel like if I'm talking good all around decks, got to be an RWS in here. This is the Centennial version. And really, need I say more about it? If I just want to go back to basics, just get that clear reading. Again, use this for anybody, for any question. It's a good reset deck. If I get overwhelmed with all the others I've collected and trying to figure out what their purpose is and this and that, I mean, like, this is the one that can just be the go-to. And I've got a few different versions of RWS, but this is the one that I keep here. And I like the Centennial version's more muted tones versus the original RWS that I had. So yes. This. Oh, I've got two decks in here. Pouch pals. Shacking up with each other. I'll get to that second. But this is my Tattoo Tarot, Ink and Intuition. Whoop. I love so very much. And I realize this isn't a straight up traditional Marseille deck, but it is in that vein. It's obviously got a more contemporary update to it and style. And you do get some RWS hints in the minors. So I know it's not your traditional Marseille, but I don't really work with Marseille. I do follow the RWS system largely, even though I will work with numerology as well. But I mean, in general, I like that these pips can give me the nods to the system that I know and work with best. But nonetheless, I think it's nice to have a representative in this general collection of a more pip style deck. And with a nod to that Marseille styling and system. And this deck is just so great. It just feels good. It's a nice, like, thick one. It shuffles nicely, and I love it. It looks so pretty laid out in a spread. It makes me feel like a real traditional tarot reader, even though it's not a traditional deck where you get some, you know, just edgier, more contemporary interpretations on here and everything, but it's just like when you lay it out like at a glance, as someone who didn't read tarot until recent years, like until that time, when you would see it on TV, it would just hold like a mystique to it. And this just looks like the kind of deck that you would see in the tent at the carnival. And I hate to be like stereotyping with fortune telling and everything, but there is something kind of cozy and enchanting about that vibe. And for me, I get that from this. But yeah, there's just a cool edge to this. The people in it have tattoos. The artwork looks like a tattoo. It's expressive. It's got like oomph. There's kind of a fiery energy to it. It's really direct, bit of a spitfire, but also fairly neutral. Having said that, I think it has like a vibrancy and a vim and verve to it. But it's very fair. I don't find it to be sassy or judgy, but then also definitely not soft and coddling either. So yeah, again, great all-rounder. I was gonna try not to say that again, but I did it. I said it again. Well, maybe I'll leave this out just to show why this other deck is in here. This is from the Witchwood Oracle. It's the Tattooed Lady Oracle. So for obvious reasons, I decided to get this as a little pairing. And speaking of fortune telling, this is one of those more kind of typical fortune telling type decks where it's almost like a Lenormand, where it's just, you know, an object that you can ascribe meaning to. These cards here give keyword suggestions, but I mean, of course, you can make your own meaning. So yeah, I just thought it would be a cool one to pair. This is a white background versus the creamier background of this, but otherwise, I mean, you can see stylistically, I feel like they look cool. More cups. Here. Wow, I'm just being real sloppy here. So, y'all, I like it. They're fun to pair. And again, it lends itself to that fortune tellery vibe that I like to get from the Tattooed Tarot. So it's really cool. This was an early tarot deck for me, and yeah, I loved it automatically. And it's like there's never any question that I'm gonna keep this one always. So there you have it. I'm going to say it again. My generally good all-arounder decks. Ones that I feel like I could grab at any time, in pretty much any mood, for pretty much any reading, especially just a general reading, a daily reading, or a reading for someone else. They're ones I feel like I will always have. They're definitely ones that never feel in any danger of being rehomed. And, you know, as time goes on, swapped a couple of these out before. I'm sure I will continue to do so. But honestly, if I just had to be limited to a few decks, and I'm not saying these are favorites. I'm not doing a desert island scenario like, oh, these are the ones I would pick. I think there are other ones I would go and grab first before that. But I guess what I'm saying is that if everything in my house were to disappear and just this box was left, I'd feel like this is still a pretty solid collection to work with, and there wouldn't be anything too terribly absent otherwise. You know, I've got the funny, I've got some of the serious, I've got the whimsical, I've got the more traditional, contemporary, and it's just, it's a real mix. It's a nice blend, but still maintaining that idea of I could use them all for everything. And I really don't know how else to describe it, but anyways, this lives next to my tarot table, and that's what's in the box today. Thank you so much for joining me. What are some of your go-to decks, your good all-arounders, if you will? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. If you stuck this out with me, I will see you next time. Bye!